welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is someone who is recording this episode from the Danvers State Mental Hospital, Janie Matthews. Hey, thanks for coming on.
Welcome.
The Danvers, they're now currently really nice condos, so did you sneak in there and did you get a condo out there in Massachusetts? What, did you sneak in to record this episode? What are you doing?
Yeah, I wish I could have, but yeah, I don't know if I'd want to go there, because, why would you want to live somewhere where an asylum used to be? Have you seen what it looks like, though? Like they still have the front of the asylum.
Oh, and it looks like a giant bat still.
Mm-hmm. They really didn't change much.
I wouldn't do it, even if I couldn't do it. Hey, it's a great condo, awesome rates. I'm like, no, they shot Session 9 there. Get out of here.
Oh, it's not even about Session 9. That is originally Hawthorne Hill.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, Hawthorne Hill was the original judge for the Salem witch trials. That used to be his land. That's where his house was. And then they built an asylum there, right? So it's got all kinds of bad mojo going on.
Holy mackerel. Wow. Imagine filming in there. So what I love, too, is, Brad Anderson, the director, he would just drive by this place. And then he went with these urban spelunkers, they call them. They scoped it out, and then eventually he wrote a horror film, got $1 million in 22 days to make a movie inside of an abandoned psychiatric hospital with asbestos actually in it.
Yeah, I don't know if I would want to sign that waiver and be like, yeah, let me sign up for this what they call it, splooge.
Yeah. Splooge. Josh Lucas got him so good. No, hey, before we go any further, I just want to say that, Janie used to be my manager when I worked at AMC movie theaters, probably like 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, whenever I came back. And Janie was the cool manager who would let me wear name tags of like Biff, Bucky, Sven, and I was never Mark. My name tags were always someone else. So whenever someone came to complain about me to Janie, they're like, man, that guy Biff, he's a real asshole. And you would always laugh, and then they would get more annoyed because they're calling me Biff.
Yes. Yeah.
How was that for you?
I'll just run them up. Those were the fun days. Occasionally I run into a couple of you guys, but yeah, that was the awesomeness of working at the theater and being young, and we kind of all ran amok. Yeah.
There was a lot of amucking, but the theaters were so packed, Janie. They were just... Remember Runaway Bride, Blair Witch Weekend?
That was crazy. That was crazy. I remember we were having, with the Blair Witch Weekend opening, I remember we were worried about the independent theater being on the beach. And we're like, we might not do so well. And then there was lines of people. It was just madness.
That was the busiest I saw the theater. Maybe Phantom Menace. And then I remember the South Park Theater that had a ton of beer in there and people would puke.
Oh, yeah.
And then Deep Blue Sea.
Sometimes.
Remember Deep Blue Sea? There's so many people in those theaters for the long. That made me so happy watching people in Deep Blue Sea.
You're like, yay, look at the packed houses.
Right? Like, we had some full theaters back in the day. But so when I went there, I was working with you in 2001. And this is when I first learned about Session 9. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And I had to eBay it for $35 in 2001. And I remember the first time watching this movie. So Brad Anderson in the commentary said that he wanted people to leave the theaters and just go, why? To him. He wanted people to walk up to him and say, why did you make this movie? He wanted it to be just an earworm. He wanted to make horror scary again. And this movie affected me the first time I watched it. You know me, I was a punk. I was like a 19-year-old punk who's boxing gloves in my trunk and running around getting all this trouble. But then this movie just wrecked me. I don't know, did you have that similar effect to this thing?
Yeah, I think it's just you're on a roller coaster. Because in the beginning, it's like you feel a certain kind of way watching it. And by the time you get to the end, you're just, what?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, my goodness. And then just the last line of this film will be something that just sticks with you. Yeah, just craziness. And the different voices, I think, like when you hear them, you automatically just know.
Yeah.
It puts you in, as soon as you start hearing the three different personalities, it puts you in a place where you're just like, you just glue your eyes to whatever scene it's on, and you're just like, I don't know, it gets you this feeling of like, I wouldn't say dread, but like, I don't know, it's like emotional, like, ugh. It's like, something creepy is going down.
Yeah, there's so much atmosphere, and you feel, so you wanted people to want to take a shower after it was over.
Yeah, I could see that, because the sheer fact that I think the one thing that I always liked about this film was that the asylum itself didn't need dressing up. It didn't need any extra touches. It was just it was like its own character through the movie. It was its own person, kind of. It had its own personality, and it was just dirty and gross. And all I kept thinking was asbestos and dirt and lobotomies.
And you're absolutely right. And they called it the sixth man in this movie. It's the sixth character, I guess, in there. And a lot of the stuff that they used, so they dressed some rooms, but a lot of the things that they used were just left over from that. So they didn't have to spend much money on props, which is kind of cool. And they were shooting with a new HD camera. So they were one of the first films to shoot with an HD camera that could shoot at 24 frames per second, not 30. And so they didn't have to spend too much money on lights because it captured the light so much better. So they just timed where they shot each day, knowing where there would be the most light. And they just used this whole beautiful big facility as a character. And something crazy happened. I was listening to this behind the scenes documentary, and when they were shooting at night, when Josh Lucas's character goes to get the coins that were there, and I have a question for you about those coins later, but he goes to get those coins, and he said that something brushed by him and he got really cold, and he went running, and something got knocked into the cinematographer. Her name's Uda Brieswitz. Something got knocked into her eye, and she almost got lobotomized on set from an on-set accident. And Josh Lucas almost walked that night. Yeah, it's crazy, right?
That's enough of this. I'm tapping out. Tapping out.
And you know what's wild is she stuck with it, and she went on to go shoot The Wire. And now she's directing. She shot Walk Hard, Dewey Cox. And she actually moved on to direct Westworld, one of my favorite episodes. I don't know if you've watched, it's a Kiksuya, the episode with... where it's the Native American. It's basically centered on him just walking around. The cinematography is beautiful. I think it's the best episode of the show. And she went from little Session 9 to directing Altered Carbon, Jessica Jones, Westworld, The Deuce, Stranger Things. Like she's knocking out some huge stuff right now. So it's pretty cool that the cinematographer from little Session 9 is now just crushing it in Hollywood.
They always start off small and go big. Normally if you go big, you kind of like trickle out.
Yeah. You should start small, work your way up.
You work your way up. Yep.
Because then you know all the gags, right? You know the sets from the ground up. Yeah, you're not like Hamilton. You don't want to waste your shot. No, I have a question for you. So Hank in this movie, played by Josh Lucas, do you think that Gordon set those coins out for him? Because that was mighty convenient how he found those.
You know, I don't think so, because the only reason why, because I've had this conversation with someone before.
That's why I brought you on for this. That's why I brought you on for this.
Well, the reason why I don't think so is because when they shut those places down, they were in bad conditions. So my thought process has always been whatever was going on in those buildings and whatever they were doing to the bodies as far as cremation and stuff, they just let it ride itself out. And that's why those buildings became so dilapidated. You know what I mean? So I feel like it wasn't a setup. I feel like it was just there, and that just adds to the eeriness of it. The fact that this one once epic building that was, the whole like grandeur of its time, and then all of a sudden we're just going to let it die. And then everything just stayed and remained the same. So I got a feeling, when they packed it up, they weren't like, hey, let's go clean out the ash.
Yeah.
We're just going to leave it all there.
Got it. So... yeah, because when he discovered that, it seemed like someone weaseled it away, and then maybe they just forgot about it and never found it.
I don't think so. I just feel like, because, you have to think of, maybe. There were some, whenever I was having a conversation with the person that we were talking about it with, there's certain things that should have melted or something should have happened to it that didn't. You see what I'm saying? In a cremation. So, it could have been, or it could have just been the stuff that was laying around the whole time. So maybe it was weaseled away. I'm just going to go with the fact that I feel like it was just left there, like, from the bodies being cremated. I think it just adds more creepiness to it. The fact that toward the end they just didn't care. And that's why the building is the way it is. No one just cared. Even like from the scene when they're walking in, where they were doing the, when they first walk in, what is it? The chamber.
Yeah.
It's just still loaded with like nasty water. It's just there. It's like people, they just up and left. They just up and left the building exactly the way it was. When they locked those doors, they just were like, hell with this place.
Yeah, peace. I'll see you later.
Yep. And then the fact that the people were still going back in after these places were closed down. So you never know.
Have you ever snuck into one of these places, snuck into a abandoned facility?
I have not necessarily snuck into one, but I have been to, is it Waverly, that asylum? I think it's in Tennessee. I think that's where we were. I've gone to a couple of them. I've actually been to places that are abandoned, a couple of abandoned, like, amusement parks, abandoned, like, cemeteries that are old. And that's why I think that's another reason why I've always enjoyed this film is going into places like that. There's always just this extra eeriness.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to walk into. you sometimes you see people still go into these places, they set stuff up, you don't know if that was originally there, if someone just put it there. It's just crazy stuff. It's crazy stuff. Yeah, I remember what is it, God, there's a cemetery that's in Tampa that if you go far into the back, like the above ground crypt, like, so you could look in there if you wanted to, but I'm gonna have to say that it's just not one of those things that I wanted to do. I was like, no, I'm good.
There was one in Tarpon Springs that we climbed a fence, got on the roof, and then a security guard ran around, and we had to lay up there for about 20 minutes. So we didn't get a chance to go inside, but then we had to climb back down the fence and run away. We tried, though. That was a dumb idea, Janie.
Were you laying on top of were you laying on top of mausoleum? Like, where were you laying on top of?
Just the roof. We got on top of the roof by a fence. And it was like some gymnastic stuff, but we made so much noise that the guard ran around.
The only experience I've ever had of something like that was there was this kid I used to know who used to do like professional skateboarding. That's how, and they went to the cemetery that's up on 54th and St. Pete, and he was trying to do a trick, I think an ollie or something, on top of one of the mausoleums, and his leg went through.
Ooh!
Yeah, he was screaming like a little girl, so we all bailed, because we're like, yeah, the security guy's gonna come, and then he's just like, don't leave me, we're like, nah, we're not trying to I'm not trying to get taken home in a cop car at like 10 o'clock at night, you on your own.
Yeah, you did the St. Pete sprint.
Yeah, pretty much, I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah. And so I have another thing for you in this movie. We're going to bounce all over the place. I'm not very good with being linear, Janie, so we're just going to kind of go wherever we go. But Brendan Sexton Jr. as Jeff in this movie, he turns out to be such a nice kid. So in the beginning, he's super earnest. He's kind of a turd. He's trying to play the music, but then he hears about the spooge spores. And eventually he ingratiates himself. He gets threatened with a lobotomy. But I love the speech that he has with Gordon. Or Mike threatens him with a lobotomy. But I like when he talks to Gordon. He's like, Gordon, you can trust me. I got you. Thank you for this. I can do this job. And later on, I love it when he comes across the lobotomized Josh Lucas. He's like, I forgot something. I'll be right back. And he runs away. And then the poor lights get shut on him. He has a fear of the dark. But my favorite part of this movie is when he is stressed. He runs out of Danvers. He is just beyond scared. And he just runs and starts eating Oreo cookies. And it's such a nice, endearing moment, isn't it? And then he gets killed. But it's so nice.
Right. I think that was probably the number one thing that kind of like depressed me about the movie, because I was just like, this poor kid is probably getting it worse than anyone, because he is a legit like fear. And he addresses that fear. He's running, and it's almost like that darkness is just chasing him. And I'm like, oh my God, this poor guy, this kid's so young. And then, he gets to that van, and he's just like, he made it out, he survived, and he's a cookie. And I'm like, you get that cookie, you deserve it. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, well, short-lived.
And then he apologizes, like, sorry, man, I was just really stressed, and these cookies were good for me. And then Gordo just wipes him out. Oh, man.
No, nothing.
When you first watched this movie, it's been so long for me, and it's almost been 20 years, but did you think it was Gordo the whole time? Played by Peter Mullan?
Oh, no. I think when I first watched it, I thought he was just so underlying shady with everything. Even in the beginning, they were talking about how long it was going to take them to do the job. And then all of a sudden, he's just like, well, I'm the captain. He goes, yes, I am. And then you just see smug. He goes from smiling to having a smug look. And then when he goes back into the building after they're coming out, I set up for him to actually be the one. So then by the time you find out some like shady stuff going on, and it seemed like throughout the whole film, it's like he just kept undermining every chance he had. He would just question him, and I'm all like, it set him up to almost like make you want him to be the villain. And then by the time you get to the end, it's just heart-wrenching to find out who it really is. It's just like, wow.
Mm-hmm. Man, like they do set him up. You're right. He hates Hank because Hank took his woman. Mm-hmm. It's fun seeing David Caruso in this. And I love that moment with David Caruso where he's like, this is going to give us our PG-13, but when he says, fuck you. It's such a weird moment when he says that to Gordo.
It's actually like to me, that's just like just a fun scene. Like, I don't know how many times I've rewound it. I'm like, I'm going to rewind this, watch this again. And like, I'll just keep playing it because I don't know, it just was so well done. And the look on his face, like Gordo's face is just like, what?
But Gordo, so this is based on, the director, Anderson, heard about this from a true story. So there was a man who killed his family